It is 6:30. Let me know when you're good to go with the recording. Oh, you are. All right, already there. Wonderful. Hello, everyone. It is 6:30 on, I almost said June. It is September. Oh, my goodness. All right, listen, this is kind of damn head. September the 13th, 6:30, so I'll officially call this meeting to order. And we'll start as always with a flag salute. So I invite everyone to stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll do a super quick roll call. One thing that I just want to, so grateful, Jan, Dr. Wojcicki, you reminded me that we should be better about the practice of pronouns. So in our roll call, I just invite you to share your pronouns as well. That way we can make sure that we are being inclusive and supportive and honoring the identities of everyone. And modeling at this level what we should be doing in all spaces of our district. So Carly Hoover, my pronouns are they, them. I'm Director District number 1.
Dave Larson, EM, District 5.
Jan Bolerjack, District 2, she, her.
Director Morris is joining us online today.
Edmund Morris, District 4, she, her.
Thank you.
Dennis Wing, Student Representative Feehan.
Thank you. And do we have Mr. Pito with us today? He tends to jump on a few minutes usually after, so hopefully he'll join us soon. And of course, as always, we have Dr. Herndon.
Yes, Dr. Herndon, Herndon,
Wonderful. And welcome to all of our guests, both in person and online. Really glad you're here. Your presence is important. It supports our district work. Your input, your feedback, everything that you bring to this space is so valuable. So thank you for spending your time here this evening. So just, I'm going to continue with our welcome message. These that you see on the screen, there are some agreements that we kind of use to ground ourselves in. And these are taken from the Courageous Conversations. So stay engaged, experience discomfort and be vulnerable, speak your truth, expect and accept non-closure. And while these are kind of our grounding and centering agreements for how we will engage with each other, there is a document that goes more in depth into that are our board operating agreements. I posted them right up there at the front if you're curious about what those are. They're also available online. And I encourage you as a part of the being a community of accountability to help us make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable for how we engage with each other, how we engage with the work. And so on. So sorry about you if you'd like to look at that. And then we'll move to our land recognition. So we in the Tukwila School District acknowledge that the land where we teach, collaborate, learn, and play is the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish and Muckleshoot tribes. As a public school district, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of this land. And we recognize the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people who have been living and working here since time immemorial. So with that, we will move to the agenda. However, we have an amendment to make, and I don't think I ever got the email. So correct me if I'm wrong, but we are needing to remove under the action items letter H. Is that correct? Great. So we'll be removing letter H, and that is the approval of out-of-state travel 3-course challenge for Warrenton, Oregon. So I will accept a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So,
Second.
All right, all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
I,
Awesome. Thank you, Director Morris. Okay, the agenda is stands approved as amended. So that means we move to our public comments. So as a reminder, there are several different ways that you can provide public comment. There's the option in person as well as virtually. If you are joining us online today and would like to submit public comment, please do raise your hand. You can also type your name in the chat as a way to indicate to us that you are going to give public comment. We do have one person here in person, Ms. Angela Meyer, to give public comment this evening. So Angela. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Angela Meyer, and I'm the office manager at Cascade View Elementary. Before I read my statement, I need to clarify something. I understand that an administrator who is no longer employed with this district falsely accused me of not writing my previous two statements. I want to make it very clear that I am intelligent and articulate enough to write my own statements, and I do not need anyone to write them for me. I'm here to express my anger and frustration over the leadership, or lack thereof, in the Tuckahoe School District. I'm looking specifically at you, Dr. Herndon. You are the superintendent and are supposed to be moving us forward in a positive direction that is focused on the positive outcomes for students, yet we continue to move backwards. One of the worst decisions you made was to hire Ted Howell. In his 2 years with this district, I would describe him as incompetent and a chaos agent, inflicting as much damage on the district as possible. As a superintendent, you can't say you didn't know what was going on, but instead of trying to fix the issues and problems, the perception is you think problems will magically go away, like the ostrich that buries his head in the sand. But that's not what happens. The problems don't go away, they even get worse. I'm also still waiting for an answer from the one question I posed to you in the March 8th board meeting. We are now almost 3.5 years out from the board meeting where students and staff from Foster confronted you and the board about the racism that was being experienced at Foster. The question was simple. Were the students and staff that participated in the abhorrent racism towards our BIPOC students and staff disciplined or reprimanded? But in fact, you have answered the question with silence. Your silence speaks volumes. At CB, we feel like we are the stepchildren of the Tuckahoe School District because our kids aren't afforded the same opportunities as the other schools, and this is on you. Our principal, Dr. Tanisha Brimstad, works tirelessly to make sure our kids have equal access to opportunities when the district fails our school. She has the best interest of our students at the forefront of every single decision that comes out of that principal's office. I have worked closely with her for the last 5 years, and I've seen the highs and lows. I've seen the horrible disrespect she has been shown, not only at the school level, but the district level. I've heard the names she has been called and the horrible things that have been said about her by not only members of our staff, but by others in the district. I've seen the hurt and the tears. I've seen the way she's been treated by district leadership, and that falls on you, Dr. Herndon. Now, we have yet another issue with the Champions program. Dr. Brimstad did everything she could to make sure our kids have the same opportunity that the other two schools have. You're supposed to know what is going on in your district. We only have 5 schools. So why didn't you know there was a problem with the program at CB? And if you did know there was a problem, when did you know it? What did you try to do to make sure our kids had equal access to Champions? These should be quite easy questions to answer. I would stand in the fire for not only Dr. Brimstad, but also with many of the administrators here tonight, because they are here for the right reasons, the students. They understand what we are all here to do, educate our kids. But because of your ineffective leadership, our district is more about personal agendas and less about educating our kids. I cannot sit by any longer and watch the ongoing character assassination of Dr. Brimstad and other administrators that are doing the right thing. This district does not like strong leaders, especially if they are women of color. Our former superintendent, Dr. Judith Berry, was a strong leader, but there were those in the district that cared more about their personal agendas, so she was targeted. In the end, she was humiliated and fired during the board meeting and let out of the building like she was a criminal. Even though this didn't happen on your watch, your lack of leadership has led those individuals and groups operating with only their best interests and not the best interest of our students to continue their campaigns of targeted harassment. This is how people are treated in this district. The blame for this rests squarely on your shoulders. We talk a lot about relational trust, but that trust has been broken. I have no faith in you or your leadership. Our students deserve better, and our community deserves better. Thank you.
So just want to name two things. Is it possible, I think, Ms. Cora, this is what you're kind of, is it possible to get a copy of that handwritten? That way we can make sure it gets accurately recorded in the minutes. Is there anyone else online that would like to read a public comment? And I just want to acknowledge, I just want to say thank you and acknowledge the bravery that must have taken. So thank you so much for being here and coming and being willing to share those words. Thank you. Okay, if there are no additional public comments, then we will move on to our race and equity report.
So we have started the school year. We've got some upcoming trainings, hopefully that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the retreat for planning for board. So two of those trainers are Dr. Rochelle Rogers Ard and Dr. Chris Canal. They've been working with the Puget Sound ESD and Tugboat School District for the last several years. And in the conversation with the Puget Sound ESD, in speaking with Eileen Yoshina, she felt it would be better to have them to start to work with the board so that we have consistency. Those two individuals have been working with administrators over the last couple of years. So, and they are also scheduled right now to do professional development with our administrators, continue with the administrators and the building district leads for race and equity. So the thought behind that is to have some consistency and kind of vision, language, alignment. And they're really excited about it. When I talked with them previously, about a week and a half ago, we kind of mapped out a timeline for the rest of the year and set that along to the board. So I think part of that is talking about the quarterly retreats that we're planning for the board. So the first one of those would be that first weekend in October. And the timing of that is pretty good as well. I don't have on hand the timeline for their professional development, but we do have the first race and equity district race and equity committee on Monday, October 3rd, from 3:30 to 5. So that will be the first one for the school year. And in that one, we'll be talking about kind of where everybody is in the school year. Any members of the building race and equity teams will be at that particular meeting.
Dr. Herndon, can you share with us the goals that have been set for these new trainers and how we'll measure those with the staff?
Yeah, so I think part of that is they want to have a conversation with the board about kind of where they see the board relationship, and that's also working with Amy Cast from WASDA. So in relation to, they know the work that they've been doing with the administrators and kind of goals they've had on the work over the last 2 years. So I think part of that is bringing the board up to speed with that as well.
So we can see those goals
Correct.
and how they.
Yeah, we'll send that out ahead of time.
Okay,
Ms. Cast also has not had the opportunity to meet these two particular individuals, so she's wanting to make sure that she knows what kind of the expectations are, and they have the work set out for the year for the different administrators, building leads, and that's coming through a progression of different professional development opportunities.
Thank you.
Where are we at with we were hiring for race and equity COSA,
Correct.
is that right? Where are we at with that?
Yes, so I can have Dr. Borsche speak briefly about that because she did review some applications.
We did review the applications, we did that. But we decided to move forward with, continuing to post. This is important that we have someone who understands the work that we, need to get done.
Okay.
And that's also something we talked about, the two race and equity positions with Dr. Rajazard and Dr. Knaus. So they understand what we're trying to do with those particular positions, and also a conversation we've had with Puget Sound ESD kind of in the region.
So I'm certain these kind of will go hand in hand, and also I just think this is a kind of a really reasonable question. So, you talk about race and equity. The work that we have to do around race equity often as if it's just like a separate body of work, right? Rather than it being like a through line through every single decision that we're making, every conversation that we're having, everything that we implement, like it is something that is just so really like the thing that we center on, right? So I guess two questions as a look. I know that like implementation, particularly around the race and equity toolkit, which was designed to be a thing that helped us infuse that, which from what I've heard, like the implementation just kind of fell short. The training around that equity toolkit, and then it hasn't been reviewed in a long time. So kind of twofold question, is that race and equity toolkit being revised? And then what will be the plan to ensure that not just the folks on the race and equity team, but anybody who is making any sort of decision, and that probably every single staff person that works in our district makes a decision, they know how to really utilize that toolkit, what it's for, the intention, and then, yeah, the details of how to use it.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it was a conversation we actually had with the trainers and Eileen Yashina at Puget Sound ESD, who was helping us initially with that development. So in the conversation we had in the spring, we did talk about the toolkit, and the concern around that was that it was kind of this being viewed as this separate entity and almost like a checkbox of things to do. I totally agree with you that the thoughts around race and equity are that it's infused in the decision making and the conversations that we have around decision making. And so the toolkit was really meant to be a couple of questions that really center you on that conversation as you're going through a process, talking about whatever, as opposed to just saying, hey, we have the toolkit, let's make sure we use it for this particular decision. That's also part of the reason why we're looking at the race and equity TOSA to be in there, so that we can see that being infused in classroom instruction. That's initially, again, part of just the first steps in making sure we kind of have that more infused. So I think the part of the review with the Race and Equity Committee on Monday, actually before we get into the third, is our thoughts around the toolkit, review the last comments that we had, and if that's the approach we still want to go with. I think it is the right approach, that the toolkit shouldn't be seen as kind of a separate. I mean, it's helpful. It's good to have it, and to have those particular questions in the toolkit. It's really just 4 questions that you're kind of looking at to remind you about that. Part of that for us is, again, as administrators, demonstrating that we're using that in the processes that we're doing on a fairly regular basis. So if that's during our meetings, during our professional development, that's how we're trying to infuse that on a daily basis.
Would you say that that intention was communicated effectively throughout the district?
I don't think so, because I think there was, at least in the spring, there was probably not clarity on is this the way we should be thinking about that? I know in some of the racial equity conversations I had and meetings where Eileen was present, I think she was mentioning that. Did it get infused through all the other aspects? I don't think so. And so I think that expectation is a little bit different. But I think the point of the toolkit was really to get people to start thinking that way. And so that just takes practice in getting that going. So I think the concern was, okay, so where did the toolkit go? And I think for others, it was like, well, we're not really using the toolkit. We're just trying to use the questions that are in the toolkit. But I think we need better clarity about how we use that in our decision-making processes and conversations.
I think I have a question. This is, I guess, not a question, just more of a comment. You know, again, thinking about really how we are infusing just equity and inclusion in our districts. You know, and I think so much of that is, you know, how we model and hold accountable people around race and equity and inclusion throughout our districts. And I know that there's a challenge, you know, anytime we're trying to do a culture or mindset shift, like that's a push and a pull. And at the same time, how are we really being loud about who we are as who we want to be as a district? I'm hesitant to say who we are, because who we are doesn't always center these things, right? So how are we really being loud as a, you know, as a leadership team and centering everything back to this? So it's more, you know, the toolkit, yes, is a tool to help us do that. And also, like, you know, I think we have to be more intentional about showing that we are going to hold folks accountable for engaging in this work.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just a box to check. It's not just a thing that we say we're committed to, like it's work. It's individual work, it's collective work. And like there needs to start being, I think, some real accountability and support for that. So, you know, it kind of goes back to what, you know, what Jan asked about what the, you know, what are the goals of the PD? How are we going to ensure that we're meeting those goals of the PD? Particularly if certain levels of PD aren't even required for all of our staff, right? So how are we getting folks on board with this culture shift if we can't require them to go to PD around it, right? It has to be a culture of how we shift, how we talk, right? So yeah, really love to see and start to really hear more about how we're going to really do that work. Any questions on this one? All right, COVID.
All right, so one of the things that we have for COVID is that I think we have just uploaded, we did get some of the updates from King County Department of Health. We have that on our health and safety website, as well as our dashboard that's on there that still tracks information about COVID related cases. We have had a few in the first couple of weeks or so. Not very many students, a couple of staff, for sure. But nothing like we saw in the spring or winter, obviously. We also are making sure that we, I think we just uploaded or will be uploading by the end of this week, each building's COVID plan, so that we have that on our actual school websites. They all have them, but I don't think they've been visible so that people would be able to see them either on the school website or on the COVID website. So in this way, if someone has a question about what that might look like in their particular building, they can reference that. So I know we had talked about that and that we didn't see that. We thought those were up there, but so that information should be going up in the next, if it's not already up there in the next day or two.
Yeah, it's up there now.
Great. So we do have those. Yes. So those are the major updates that we have for COVID-19. Now, there are major changes, again, with guidance. We have restocked some of our tests. we just want to make sure we had updated tests, they can go stale, so. We did a reorder of tests and those are available for anybody who needs them. We also continue to have our vaccination clinics. So our next one is planned. Thursday, okay, Thursday, September 22nd.
Okay, one comment, two questions. Just want to acknowledge, Ms. Maestro, and just already I'm seeing just more effective communication that's happening. I was really appreciative of the email that came out even just the other day, that outlined, hey, here's kind of where we've seen a little bit of a peak. Here's kind of the guiding things that may take us to the next level. So I really appreciate that. I think that's the kind of communication we need, that will help folks feel at least like we know what's happening, right? And some more sense of security. So my two questions, I had asked last time around the after school programs and the alignment. And so I just kind of want to confirm, have we received the COVID plan from Champion?
Yes,
We have a plan. Okay,
Partnering with us to find out. Yes.
and we have it. That was my biggest thing. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And then also I mentioned last time the hope of kind of like staff surveys to pick back up. And I think now would be a great time, 2 weeks into school, just checking in, saying, hey, how are folks feeling about our communication so far around COVID? Maybe even shouting out Ms. Maestro. Yeah, so I'd love to see those pick back up now the school year started.
yeah, we are planning our monthly staff surveys around various topics, so we'll be starting one for September coming up here.
Any other questions? How have things been feeling back in the building?
I haven't been able to really experience that because I have only start, so I'm only there for like an hour a day.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the approval of our consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any, actually, all in favor?
Aye.
Hi. Edna.
Director Morris, if you're there to give us an aye for the approval of the consent agenda. If not, I'll take that as a no.
It's an I, I'm sorry.
No, you're good, you're good. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so moving on to board discussion, 2 items. So we'll start with retreat planning. I think that's you, Rick.
Yes, so as I mentioned previously, we have on the calendar October 8th. As a special Saturday meeting, we're planning on having that to be the kind of board retreat. We did have a request from the 2 trainers to see if we could move that to Friday the 7th. Because they have that availability for both of them to be present. For Saturday, only one of them can be present and they both would like to be present.
Are we talking Friday evening?
I think it was. I have to remember what it was. Um, I, I think it was in the morning. But I can get their times again from them for sure.
And are we hoping our students will be there also?
That'd be great. If they would like to be there.
But what does that do when we're talking about a school day?
We would just see if they can. But how that fits into their schedule.
I'm also aware that Carly has a job that
Yeah.
doesn't have the flexibility that mine does.
That's what I was looking at.
Do you have a time that does? Or doesn't work?
Fortunately, that's actually a good day because I'll be taking it off. Because it's a busy training for me, so, yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
I can, great, and I think I got a reply from others that it worked, so I will let them know and then firm up the time, and then we can talk to both our student reps as well.
So it'll be in,
Instead of
instead
Saturday,
of,
yes.
okay,
And then there were a couple of other dates that were on there, but that were also shifts, and part of that is because the trainers are actually in town. They're both based out of, or at least Dr. Rogers Art is based out of Oakland. And so she's coming up because during that week, she's already working with us. So she said, I'm already in town. It'd be great to do this in person. So the couple of dates that I put forward, that would be shifts from Saturday to Friday, were days that she was actually going to be in town. And I think Dr. Knaus is also available on this particular date. So, but we can start with this first one. Ms. Cass also has not had the opportunity to meet them, so she wanted an opportunity to talk about that and see how that all fit together with their plan.
and can you remind me kind of where we settled on the printer topics for that retreat?
Well,
I thought we
we did, so I think I'll have to review that and then see how it fits in with also how Dr. Rogers and Knaus are viewing that day too, and the amount of time that they're looking at. So I think the initial one was talking about kind of how we structure meetings, and probably also just community building. I think that was another one that we're continuing to build on. So I can review those additional topics that we talked about and then see how kind of that fits in with how they're also thinking about how to approach the kind of race and equity professional development for the board at that level too. So I'll check with them. And then get back to you later this week.
Any other questions on board retreat? Any other? Or does a very mild discussion?
I've got what I need.
All right, WASDA General Assembly, Director Larson.
So every year, the School Directors Association, WASDA, gets together once a year in an activity they call General Assembly, which is where, representatives from all the districts come and we decide positions, legislative positions, and what are called permanent positions or resolutions, which are kind of enduring values of the organization. And so school director, and every year, people, any director can propose new resolutions and new legislative positions as well. And those all get put up for a vote before the group. And so this year it's going to happen on September 30th and October 1st. It's kind of a 2-day 5 hours each day marathon kind of situation. And what I'm going to do, what I've been planning over the next 3 meetings. So this meeting, I just wanted to kind of let you know that that's coming up, and I've included attachments, the monstrous book with all the proposals, 190 pages. I will go through them all. I don't expect anybody else to necessarily. Most of them, I will tell you, they come out of 2 committees. They've been vetted through 2 committees. The resolutions are permanent committee. Permanent positions are vetted through the resolutions committee, and the legislative positions are vetted through the legislative committee, which is I'm on. And so I've seen all the legislative ones and made sure that our input got into all of those proposals. If you look in the booklet, there are, each of the committees comes forward with a pass or do not pass recommendation for each of the items, and that then goes to the the process of voting and the body as a whole decides up or down whether they want to include it or not. I will tell you that vast majority, most of the time, they take, as in most legislative bodies, they take the recommendations of the subcommittees because those are the ones that have gone through and done the work. And my intention this year, I'm the setup as a voting delegate. Each board can have only one voting delegate, and one speaking delegate, although if anybody wants to speak, if you see a particular issue in here that you want to speak on, we can actually trade voting. I can let you have the voting position for one position and speak if you want to speak on it. And so it can rotate around. When we did these in person, so this is going to be virtual again this year. When we did it in person, it was pretty easy because you're just sitting right next to the person, you just pass them the card and then they could pop up. Virtually, it's a little more complicated because, we'd have to do it by phone. I log off and then you log in as the voting and then you can vote. And so, but it's possible to do if anybody's interested in doing that. So what I'm doing this first time is I've included as an attachment the big book, which has all the details. Also a little spreadsheet that Walter prepares that has all the voting items. There's like 120 of them. And with just kind of the high level description and what page they're on. So if anybody's, if you want to go through and review them during the next meeting, and if there's anything that catches your eye that you want to talk about, we can talk about it at the next meeting. Otherwise, like I say, my intention is generally to vote the recommendations of the committees. Like I say, the Ledge Committee, I was involved in all that. So if there's something that you see that, you think we should do something different on, vote something different, then, bring it up and we can talk about it. The second part of the process is then once all the positions are voted, there's a process for prioritizing them. And this is to give the WASDA advocacy folks guidance about what they should be advocating for during the legislative session. And if you recall last year, we had like the top 15, are so each district can pick the top 15 and then they collect them all together and do it as an organization. This year, they've decided to just do the top 10, partly because there was an effort to consolidate, there's lots and lots of positions and they consolidated some. So we're going to go with the top 10 this year. And what I would propose so the next meeting for us, we can just talk about the positions. If anybody has a position that they want to talk about or, change a vote on or something like that, we can do that. And then the following meeting, we can look at how we should prioritization. So I've included attached to this meeting, just so you can remember last year's priority list of things, so you can kind of check that out. Generally, as I mentioned in the past, I'd like to prioritize the funding ones kind of at the top because that is, we're talking about advocating with the legislature and that's their main job. And that's where we get 80 to 90% of our money is from them. So the funding ones are the ones that I tend to like to put toward the top. However, we can put other ones there. Sometimes the legislature can be helpful in setting some structures around things in law that kind of nudge boards or whatever to do things. So, if there's something that you see in there, we can take a look at that as well. And so I propose to do what I would come like the first meeting in October. I will come in with a kind of a recommended prioritization, and then we can talk about whether you want to make any changes to it. So that's all I have on that. Is there any questions? Is that okay? I'll proceed on that basis.
Yes, that's something.
Okay. So that's what I will plan to do. And like I say, I wouldn't advise reading the entire booklet, but I would advise just looking at the space. And if there's things that kind of pique your interest, then you can delve into them and we can talk about anything that you're interested in. So, okay.
I'm not sure, how relevant it is, but I'm curious if there are any kind of positions from the committee that maybe you kind of want right in alignment with. If there are anything that you for them? in
No, I worked with them, like, so we put forward a couple of positions, you may recall, related to funding for like counselors for CTE students. It's kind of a little bit of a wonky thing, but it's, you know, for us it'd be more money and actually for the entire state of Vermont. And so, yeah, I got that worked into the position. So, yeah, there's nothing. Yeah, I will go through and detail it, but there's nothing that I remember that I didn't get resolved by working with the group, so.
Hey, Dave, when I'm looking at the page that shows the voting order for positions with due pass recommendations, so I'm assuming that's the committee is saying, we want you to pass these. Are the ones that were not recommended for passage, are they also still in here, or did they?
Yeah, so what happens, the way it works is, you know, any school board member can submit. And then the committee reviews it
Right,
and either decide, yeah, we agree with it, or we don't agree with it, and then comes out with a pass or do not pass. That's just a recommendation, so
Right.
the body as a whole can pass the do not pass recommendation.
okay, so the ones that are do not pass
Yeah.
are just stuck in the midst of all these, you'd have to go
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I can tell you that this year there was kind of a theme, there was, which is not surprising, you know, given the politics of our country. There was a lot of attempts to try and, like push out discussion of race, and, you see that kind of thing. And those fortunately all got pushed with do not pass recommendations by the committees. So
Okay.
that was kind of I would say is the biggest controversy one this year. So you have to keep in mind, this is sometimes this comes down to a, east side, west side thing.
Right.
I mean, east side is a little more conservative than the west side, so that happens, but
As I was reading through the first few pages, there wasn't any do not pass, so I.
Yeah.
But if I looked.
there aren't a ton of them, but they're in there, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I guess my other curiosity is, and I know that you are actively like, in connection with our legislatures here. And I'm curious, like, if there's any, like, do you have conversations about some of these priorities and like how feasible these priorities may even be to like, go forward anywhere? Like, I guess, are you kind of tapping into that resource that you have to make some of these decisions? Or
You talk about, do I talk with our legislators?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, no, I know you talk with our legislators a lot. I know you have the connection with them. I guess when it comes to like how you prioritize certain
Oh.
things, does conversation that you have with, David Hackney, for instance, impact how you might prioritize something based on whether he thinks there's possibility of it moving anywhere?
oh. I'll tell you, that so the main thing that I work on is this concept of equity in funding.
Mhm.
So pushing funding where the student needs are, and there's. If I kind of backed off that priority, because the legislature, that's a tough one to sell to the legislature, and the reason is, I found this by talking to the legislature this year, that the legislators from wealthy districts are fighting this really hard. They don't want it because it's not good for them. And so, I've been told by several of our legislators, it's not realistic, it's not, and so do I back off from that? No. So if that's what you're,
Gotcha.
I mean, I don't, that particular issue, which is the fundamental issue, I think you just keep pounding away at it. So whether it's realistic, I mean, whether it'll happen, this year, or there's a lot of things that in the legislature require multiple years, and you have to kind of build up, and there's also little things that you can get, little things in the budget bills that start to move in that direction, I mean, but to get to the point where we have a truly, what I call progressive funding system, for example, I'll just tell you, I've enlisted, I found this, professor up at the University of Washington, David Knight, who is, he's in the College of Education, and he's an expert in education finance. And he's written an op-ed for the Seattle Times, and he was interviewed on KUOW about this funding issue. And, he's right on my issue. He's advocating for it. So I've got him slated to talk to the ledge committee, in October. So that's, and I hopefully, I would love to get him maybe to talk to our legislature and one of their, anyway, so that's, you kind of have to, anyway, I'm pretty excited about having him advocate for that position and hooking on to that, so trying to convince more people that way, so. Working on it.
Thanks. Director Morris, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, I do. I have a question about your rating of the special support for special ed program. If that were moved up to a higher priority, would that alleviate some of the funding concerns?
So the way they're going to do rating this year actually is, we put in the top 10 and regardless of order. You have to keep in mind that these, there's 140 different positions. So if you're anywhere in the top 10, and I can tell you on special education, I mean, every district in the state, that will be in one of the top 10 positions that WASB will pursue. So there's no danger of that one. That one's not really controversial with school districts at all, because everybody's on board with that one. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it, thanks.
And I think I just want to name, please do, if you have time, both Dennis and Sam, to look at these legislative priorities. Your input is equally as valuable as ours. And we want to make sure that your priorities are represented in our priorities. So please do take some time if you can to look at that and bring your feedback kind of along with the timeline that he just shared. Okay. Great, so it moves us on to questions only presentations. There are many. So kind of as a reminder for these, the board gets the opportunity to submit questions, written questions about these presentations. They usually get posted on board docs, so you can see the answers to those questions as well. Again, so you can see the kinds of questions that we're asking outside of this space. I think that's really important. So just know that that exists there. So just kind of go down the list. Are there any additional questions for a highly capable program?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was looking through the highly capable program, and I did some extra research about it. And from my understanding, the author of this program came to you guys and did a presentation before in order to kind of try to get you guys to do the program. And so I was wondering if right now you guys are going forward with this program and there's just no other consideration for backing up with it.
Great question. I'm actually, if that's okay, to kind of send this to one of you two, mostly because I was not here when that happened. And I'm not kind of sure how the process works. So kind of the initial question was that someone that came to us, presented this program, the high cap program, and did we as a board approve that program?
Well, let me ask a little clarifying question. So, and Dr. Horsey can jump in on this too. When are you talking, the highly capable program involves a few different things, that's depending on whether it's elementary school, right? Are you talking about
school?
Elementary school? Okay, so you're talking about the cluster model?
Mhm.
Okay. I don't, you say you think the originator of that gave us a presentation?
Or am I mistaken?
We were given books to
Yeah,
read
yeah,
last year. But I
yeah.
don't think we had any presentation beyond those handbooks.
Right. I think our staff, probably the previous CAO, gave a presentation on it.
And so I guess your second question, that was not something that was specifically approved
Mhm.
by the board. Kind of, that was a, operational decision, right? Made by the CAO at the time.
So I know this is questions only, but I actually have comments that I really do oppose the clusters program. I did some extra research and there has been very little empirical data about whether this program actually effectively helps students of color or students of different socioeconomic statuses. And it does use the Naglieri test that while it says it helps students who are multilingual, it is similar to an IQ test, and IQ tests have in the past have a history of racist past. And while it also said that these tests cannot be prepared for, it actually is, it seems to be pretty popular in school districts who are majority white. And there's a lot of websites where white mothers are giving tips on how to help with children to prepare for these tests. So that's one thing. And looking at, I did some extra research as well, and I looked up for the Seattle Public School, they also do something similar with the cluster program. And there is this pattern called the highly capable slave ship. And what happened was, so in their district, there's several students who are in the highly capable program, and they go through pretty much the same process. The thing is, there is an unproportionate amount of white students who are in the highly capable program compared to Black students. So if I can look at the exact numbers here, it says that 67% of highly capable kids are white, although whites make up about 47% of the district, while Black people are only 1.6% of the gifted program, though they make up 15% of the district. So I really want to bring this to attention that this, it is showing that it's actually marginalizing people. And especially in our district where there's a lot of students of color, I don't think this program will be good for us. And given there's no, there's lack of data whether it actually is effective or not, and there is actually data that it's opposite of effective for students in our district. I don't think we should be moving forward with this program and instead backtrack and try to, there's already a lot of students in our district who are not meeting state requirements. So instead focusing on that instead of uplifting students who are highly capable, but in the wrong way, because this program doesn't seem like it's going to help, but it looks like it's going to do more harm.
Thank you for doing that research.
Yes, and your comments are always welcome. Even, I mean, it says questions only, but it's questions and comments all along.
Yeah.
I wanted to just kind of leave a little bit of space if there was anything that anyone wanted to speak to kind of in response to some of that. And I guess maybe that might be best actually coming from you since, Dr. Rashid wasn't here, kind of when that decision around the cluster model was made.
Yeah, I think part of it, there's a challenge of highly capable programs. There's a state requirement that we have for serving students they identify as highly capable. So they have in the state, you're supposed to identify those students. You can choose different ways in which to identify students.
Yep.
So different students or different districts use them in different ways. So in a district like Seattle that's really big, they do kind of have a cluster model. So they'll, have folks in different places, different schools identified. They're also trying to get away from that particular model because they do realize that, it's because they have so many schools that they have the programs lead to a lot of changes in neighborhoods, taking students out of particular areas that aren't their neighborhoods and not in neighborhood schools. So I think the idea for us is also, we struggled with it for many years, even before I came in, about what's the best way to serve the students who meet the state requirements that they have in there. So this was the model that we decided on that would meet those needs. Again, it's not a tremendous amount of, we don't have like the same numbers that some other districts might have. But it's always something we're trying to review to see if we are meeting the needs of all our students.
Right. So
So we review that annually. So that's something we look at to say, is this the right model that we're looking at? Are we meeting the needs of those students as well as defined by what we have to do for the state?
but given the data and the lack of data that has been shown and that I've talked about, it has been shown that this program would not be helping students of color in our district. So I was just wondering, are you guys still going forward with this? Or I understand there's different ways of identifying highly capable students. So why don't we, look towards those different types of programs instead of this one where it has shown to not work and it's, actually we do the opposite of helping students.
yeah, I think that's something that, we've looked at in teaching and learning, we'll continue to look at, so. I mean, you're raising a lot of really good points on the disproportionality, that many of these kinds of programs do have, so.
Yeah, I think, here's an example where we can, apply the toolkit. And so the first question on the toolkit is, who are underrepresented groups? And, when I look at our specific data, so we see clearly the Black and Latinx students are underrepresented, and Asian and two or more races are overrepresented. So the question, as Dennis was talking about is, the second question on the rubric is, does this policy program practice or decision worsen existing disparities or produce other unintended impacts? And then have you intentionally involved stakeholders who are members of the communities, and what are the barriers to more equitable outcomes? So it sounds like there needs to be more work done in terms of determining we have a disproportionality, and it's been there. And so, how can we address that?
So Representative, thank you for that information. The How We Can Go program is already set in motion and it started. So the snagging back or to remove those students now would feel unfair to the students who are currently. But I would like to continue this dialogue so that we can look at some more data research and assessments. Thank you.
And I think it would be worth potentially even adding this really important topic on a future agenda. To get a kind of an updated kind of status report. And I think also being specific about, and I can't, I'm not specific, no. Sorry, really specifically, I think there can be some actionable things that we can put in place to, at least within this program while we are using it, to attempt to address some of those things. I do think there's, some overall, concern, and I don't want to just like look backwards. I want to look forwards, and I think it's important to name, ask, was the toolkit considered, utilized when this program was being considered? And if not, why not? Particularly because that tool existed at the time. And we have been talking, in at least the 10 years that I've been on the board, I'm pretty sure every single meeting we talk about community input, community voice, student voice. So where was that in the decision-making around this particular program? And then I think it's really intriguing to know that they're pulling the program from districts around us. That probably tells us something. And so what are we doing with that information? To actually move us forward. I totally understand and respect what you just said. And I get that. So now what do we do?
And I do think that the reason we went to this was because what we were using was not working. So this was the way to move into something that would take some of that disparity away, especially around language. And so I do remember using the toolkit mindset in this when we talked about this. But it may not get us where we want to go.
Well, of course, the other question on all these things is, it's one thing to say, okay, we're doing X, but how are we doing it? And that's the other thing, when you look at studies, you have to figure out, was the program, I think one of the complaints that we've heard from the staff over the years, because we've tried this cluster, is that it wasn't implemented, as we say, with fidelity or completely implemented. And so, and I don't know what the situation was in Seattle, whether they completely implemented or not, but a lot of times you really need to take a deeper dive. Something may work if it's implemented well, but implementing it well, that's a big, a check. It takes a lot of effort to make sure you do that right. And I don't know, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, so I don't know whether if it was implemented well, it would work. I don't know, but anyway, that's just something that when you're looking at some of this data, you have to kind of ask, okay, it was implemented, but was it implemented well?
I think too, I was trying to remember that like, nothing is ever going to be perfect. So how can we, everything's gonna have it, positive and negative benefits and potential outcomes. And so again, how are we putting things in place to navigate those as they come up and utilizing, the good parts of the tools that we need, right, to support them.
I'm just kind of curious, Dennis, in your research, because that's always the big question is, did you find a strategy that actually worked? Yeah. That's been our challenge. That's been our challenge for a number of years, so.
Seattle's been working on their program for at least a decade to try to change it.
Yeah, it's not an easy nut to crack, but anyway, we need to keep working on it.
Thank you so much. All right, curriculum overview.
I have one follow-up question on this one. I didn't word it carefully enough, I think, asking about where it's being piloted. So I think you told me how many. Can you give me an idea? Is it all across the grades and across the schools kind of equally?
It's implemented in the elementary schools,
Uh-huh.
K through 5
Uh-huh.
in the math.
Right, oh, no, I understand that. I just meant,
So then.
so each of the schools has some teaching it in different grades, or are they all in one grade? Or-
So the two math programs, Imagine Learning,
Mhm.
and then there's SFUSD. And so in each school, there's Imagine Learning, and then there's SFUSD, and then the current curriculum, which is math specials. So then the schools, the plan is for, since it's happening at each of the 3 elementary schools, then those teachers who are teaching those, the math pilots, then there's a math PLC, where they will come together and talk about it, because there's not another person in that building teaching that same.
So if there's 3 third grade teachers, each one's doing a different curriculum, and they'll get together with the other schools. Wow, that's complicated.
It's doable.
Yeah.
So we have our first math PLC coming up. If not this month, early in October.
Okay.
Where they're coming together to talk and discuss and learn.
It'll be interesting to see how they compare them. Yeah.
Is it possible that, I mean, the goal is, of course, then to have those PLCs and decide on which is the one curriculum that we settle on. But has there kind of in your experience been a situation where like a curriculum may work better for some students, for some classrooms than others? Like, would there be a situation where you could see yourself actually implementing 2 different curriculums based on the needs of the students and the learners? Or is that too complicated?
No, it's usually one curriculum is decided, and if there's some supplemental, then you go with the supplemental that will support that. That is typically one curriculum, and that's so that there's PLCs and continuity in the experiences that the students are having. And that teachers can actually collaborate and talk about some of the things that they are doing well or need more support with, and PD can also support those things.
When you think about like determining the effectiveness of a curriculum, what are the measures that we look at?
Looking at student work, that becomes the evidence of how they are taking in the material. And so that's where a lot of the conversations are going to take place in terms of looking at the student work. So here is what we anticipated our student learning. This is the standard. And now that we've shared the standard and we've given the students the instruction, now after the instruction, we've given them time to work on it on their own. how do they, take that information, synthesize it with what they already have, and then share what they can do on their own independent.
So I'm curious as to, I mean, we go through these cycles that, you know, every 6, 7 years, whatever, we replace the curriculum, and the question always in my mind is, you know, what are we trying to solve with that? I mean, a schedule is, okay, just replace it to replace it, but, you know, that's not really a great reason to do it. And so what is it that we're trying to, and, you know, if you look at assessment scores, you know, our math scores are not that great, but, you know, instruction involves, you know, curriculum, pedagogy, assessments, use of assessment, all those things. So I'm curious, are we doing this because for some particular reason that our curriculum, our current curriculum is deficient in some way?
It's a really good question. And it's been my understanding that there is a policy that every 10 years we do an adoption. And we are, based on the information that I've come across, the math adoption was up next. And that is.
So do you think that's interesting to me. Do you think there's a board policy that says we have to do that?
I believe there's procedure policies
Okay.
somewhere.
Okay, yeah,
I can looking back at some notes.
Yeah.
For teaching and learning.
yeah,
I saw that.
Yeah.
The math was up next.
yeah, I know, we have seen those charts, yeah. I'm just kind of, yeah, I'd be interested to go look at that to see if, because I want us to be replacing it for some good reason.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure the, you know, the curriculum companies love the idea of having to replace them but it not only is it expensive, but it's, you know, it takes time training and all that. Now, I can tell you that the last time we replaced the K-5 curriculum, that made a huge difference. Like, you know, I can show you our scores just went like that. So I'm not questioning, you know, it may very well be that it's a really good idea, but I think we should, I just want to encourage us to, you know, be really kind of fairly precise about what we're looking to replace in terms of the efficiency, if we can do that, because, yeah,
I know that the ones that they're targeting, it helps in terms of explaining better how to think about math.
Okay.
versus,
yeah,
Working out an algorithm.
yeah.
Mm.
Okay, and that sounds to me like, because that's one of the things that when we went to the Common Core State Standards, I think, you know, that's one of the areas that's key. So that sounds to me like a really good reason. Yeah, okay. Good.
Director Morris.
Yes. Always before, when we've piloted programs such as the math, each teacher had an opportunity to work with each curriculum. So maybe a half a year on one and a half a year on another. Because when we did the last adoption of the math, I would never have chosen the math one that they did if I hadn't have seen the other to compare. I just am concerned if we only have them pilot one. And also, I'm a little concerned about doing it this year when we know that we recognize that our students are behind a little bit academically. So would it behoove us to wait a year and so that the children are more on grade levels so that we have a more accurate analysis of whether they can handle the curriculum? Does that make sense?
So really good question, yes. So we're piloting two. So we have Imagine Learning and SFUSD. And we're going to pilot them for the entire year for that very reason that you mentioned. Because if we do it half a year and then we give them something else, then we have given students two different things to attempt to adjust to and learn. And so the goal was to go through it for an entire year versus half a year of one thing and then half a year of another thing. And the question will be, are we really what are we assessing? Are we assessing how well we could deliver it, or we as the adults understood it well? Or are we really assessing how students demonstrate their knowledge? So we wanted to do a full year and then make a recommendation. And if we get to the end and we don't have a recommendation, you know, maybe that becomes another question to the board, can we have another year to do this?
Okay, I guess I'm just concerned about looking at one curriculum and evaluating it and comparing it to another. I think that would be challenging. Without a,
How are adoptions done in the past when you get multiple? You get multiple. Okay.
Well, I think in the past, I mean, typically you're gonna pilot more than one, because if you're just piloting one. If you're taking too long on that, you're basically making a decision, it's this one or not, and then. You're gonna wait another year to do another one. I mean, it can drag out the pilots pretty long if you're just doing one at a time. So I think it's, you're looking at two and getting feedback, and then you use the curriculum council to give additional feedback.
well, I am very concerned about that. Is there a way that we could do units and not? I just think there's a better way to do that than just looking at one curriculum. Can we look at units of study and compare those?
Anything
It's
is
just-
possible. It would be good if we could go to the curriculum council and hear from the teachers in terms of what is working for them.
Okay, that would give me a little comfort zone. Thank you.
I was just wondering about the vertical connections. I love the idea that the teachers are working across schools with those who are working with the same curriculum. So if I'm a third grade teacher and half of my class is second or first grade math, we're piloting a curriculum. Do I have all the grades? You know, after a couple of years, you build up all those resources in your classroom, but yeah, so they must be working vertically with each other also to make sure that that third grade teacher also has the second and the first grade material for that curriculum? Or what are they doing for the kids that are way behind?
That's when our NTFS systems
Okay.
are in place.
And are they using those curriculums then? They aren't, are they?
So the third grade teachers get the third grade material,
Mhm.
they get their grade level material.
Right.
And they are working to understand that material as well as deliver the instruction. And then when they come together in their PLCs with all of the third grade teachers, then they talk about, so here is my stuff point, or here's where I excel, or here's a strategy that I tried, or what are you doing in this space? So it's, right now it's making sure that we understand what our grade level is supposed to know. And then also understanding what our students know, and then how do we either continue to excel our students' knowledge or bring our students to the grade level. So there's a lot of thought going into this math adoption, especially at the elementary level, where they're also teaching, you know, ELA and the other subjects as well.
I was just thinking of the paras who are floating around between the curriculums then. They're having to know more than one curriculum. I mean,
Okay,
they can do it.
so you say they're having to learn more than one curriculum, and it's the math concept. And this curriculum may show you how to do it this way,
Right.
that curriculum may show you, but it's the math concept that
Sure.
we have to help and make sure that everybody understands the math concept.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The other concept in this that I learned when talking the math expressions are current on is there's a concept of spiraling. So, you know, you teach something at first grade and then you teach it again at second grade, and you teach it again at third grade. And so, you know, you're always, and you're using kind of, if it's the same curriculum, you're using similar language and the way of doing it. So there's that aspect that's going through. I think a good curriculum does that.
Does that,
Yeah,
and SWSD does.
thank you.
Jonathan Morris, did you? Yeah, go ahead.
Is there, is it possible for me to attend the curriculum council on this discussion? Or not?
I'll let you know. I'll let you know when we are going to meet regarding the math adoption.
Okay,
Right now.
thank you very much. And, and is it possible,
My biggest.
is it possible for us to know who's piloting? Which staff members are piloting?
Wonderful. Right, any other questions around this piece? Thank you so much. Did you hear my last question?
Oh, yes. Yes, we can get you the list.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't hear your answer. Thank.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to increasing mental health supports. So this is kind of an update from our last meeting. What additional questions do folks have?
So I guess my biggest kind of overarching question on this one is, so we have here a list of a bunch of stuff, some staff, some, you know, some training, some different things. The question in my mind is always, you know, two things. One is, it would be helpful to know the funding sources for these, particularly the ones that are ESSER, because, you know, we said that for ESSER dollars, we're gonna try these things and then see which ones work and which ones don't work. And that's the second part of my question is, you know, for each one of these, you know, what's the measures we're gonna look at to see if it's working or not? And particularly, I'm interested for the ones that are funded out of ESSER, because we're gonna need at the end of 2 years now to say, okay, this one worked, this one didn't work, this one whatever. So I guess what I'm asking for is kind of a, you know, a spreadsheet attached to each one of these and say, here's the funding source and here's how we're gonna look at whether this worked or didn't work. So that would be really helpful.
I agree with that 100%. I think my biggest comment, first off, thank you so much for your answers on all of the questions. I guess I'm just a little bit, maybe there's some misalignment in like what we mean by plan. Because to me, this doesn't feel like a plan. As Dr. Larson said, it's just kind of a list of things. It doesn't give us any information about how these things are working together, how they're actually being implemented, what it means. So I'd like to ask again for a plan. And how we're effectively supporting these across the district. How are we, you know, ensuring that the practices that are working effectively at one elementary school are being shared? Like, how are we really bringing all of these things into what's the plan? I guess.
And what's the assessment?
I love one.
Yeah, I mean, but we have been talking about this as a team as well. Part of this was also making sure that people are aware of even what's available. So, you know, part of this is getting this out so that students, staff, parents, they all know what's available that we have. The other part that we were talking about is, especially when you're looking at the website for the different areas that people may be interested in, who they can connect with in their particular school so that they know who to go to. We don't have that in there, so that's another issue that we want to make sure people know, like, we have some resources available for anxiety, but who would I connect with in my school about that?
Yeah, and I, you know, that webpage looks great. I think that's a really great start. Do students know that it exists?
Right, that's what we're saying.
Yeah,
We
so
gotta get that out.
when I say like, what is your plan? Like, that is a component of it,
Yeah.
right? So how are we ensuring that folks actually have access and knowledge that these resources exist? That is a part of the plan. Or should be a part of the plan. And here again, we have no plan. I understand that this was about getting out what's available. You know, you said you did follow up with this list the Friday after our board meeting. I'm grateful for that. I was expecting the next phase today, not just a recopied list of what we saw in that email on Friday. So there's that. I think, I've heard the MTSS, mentioned several times, and I would love some more information on that. So maybe that could be kind of again in a presentation in the future. Because because what I've kind of heard, is that, well, I actually don't even want to speak around that. I think there's lack of clarity across the district about how even the MTSS team is working and operating, what even that all means. So I think clarity for us would be really useful. And then how are we ensuring clarity across the district? That goes into the plan. What is the plan going to be? So maybe we could try again at our next board meeting to get to phase 2 of now we know what's in place. How are we going to make sure folks have access to these things and really like, I don't know.
So can I ask one little something for clarity? So let's say at the elementary school, you have, your social worker, you have your counselor, and they've expressed to students, if you are experiencing this, you come and see me. So that will be a part of the plan.
Yeah, I mean, yes, because I mean, I think, and I know that probably like seems like really nitty gritty. But at the moment, like, I feel at least a personal responsibility to continue to give our community what they're asking for and our students what they're asking for. And so I think to that point, like that gives us the information that says, this is what the process is. If student comes to someone, this is kind of like where they point them to or what they do. And so, yes, that would be really useful.
Another piece of that for me would be that the counselors typically see 6 students a day, but there are 12 signing up that want to see the counselor. So are there waiting lists? And then, so are we able to serve all the kids with these resources? But also the outside resources, like, don't we still have Rays coming in to our,
The last I heard from them, they were saying they're full up, but
yeah, but
Yeah.
does that mean they're full up here? I mean,
that's what
there's,
I understood, but
Yeah.
that's dynamic.
right, so they're serving our kids in the mental health area. So I think they should also be on this list with the information of how many they're serving. And I'll keep asking for how much we're paying for. But also our substance use programs. I think we have somebody that comes in and does substance use disorder work with our students. And that's, yeah, I don't think that's on here. The Urban League is also in our schools, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
So if
And-
we keep going on the webpage, there's a list of like disabled. Atlantic Street, that information is on the web.
Counsel and support too.
Yeah.
And substance.
I have a quick question for Dennis. So, pardon, oh, okay. Do you feel like you and other students kind of know where to go if you have some whatever mental health issue? Do you feel like people know, students kind of have an idea of where they should go?
Not exactly. I know that on this website, it states where to go, but me as a student, I didn't know of this website until I looked at the agenda.
Yeah.
So there was not a lot of like communication about that or like advertising this training stuff. These are some of the resources.
Okay.
While like it's known that you can go to a counselor to talk about whatever you want, still there's like still uncertainty about it because we still don't know like if we talk about a certain thing, are they gonna send us to a psych ward? You know, that's
Yeah.
a big thing.
Right.
So still no like no talk of that. I think that should be important and specifically about substance abuse. Counselor, I like or should said that someone was like here to like work on it, but so far as a student, I have not like seen or heard any school-wide activity or program that is like trying to prevent substance abuse.
So is it hard to get to see a counselor?
Um, for me, yes, last year I set up several, I set up like 4, 5 meetings and like most of the time, the counselor was so busy that she wasn't
Yeah.
able to see me and so I had to come back again and again,
Yeah.
again several times.
Okay.
But that for me was something relating to my academics.
Yeah, right.
So, I'm not sure how it is for,
Yeah, if you have mental health, which is
Mental
more
health,
immediate, yeah,
but-
okay.
Yeah, I also agree with Dennis. I feel like our students don't know directly where to go because then again, I feel like counselors are busy as well. And I don't think like the resources that we have aren't like clearly um aren't like clearly shown to the students, like they aren't like promoted to the students. Like you could go here if you need like if you're going through something and you need somebody to talk to. And I think that's something we should work on.
That's something that can be shared in the homework.
Advisory.
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 I think it could be.
Director Morris had a question. Sure.
Can you remind me how many counselors we have at the elementaries?
No counselors.
No counselors. But I thought that was something we were going to be working on getting at the elementary.
Yeah, I think
There's,
there's one additional for social emotional, whatever the building wants to do.
Yeah, if the principal wants to hire, yeah.
because there's a big difference between a counselor and a social worker and what they have to offer.
Yeah, that's why I think it's, the idea is being left to building administrative discretion. What's needed in that building.
So then can we find out what's being done but in those instances?
Yes, we can find out for each building.
Thank you.
I think something else that's coming to mind for me, particularly in the elementary schools that are already under-resourced as far as like social workers and counselors go. And we have a greater ability to send high school students who have a more autonomy over their ability to seek mental health services. We can refer them places. How can we actually build a stronger infrastructure in our elementary schools where we can't? Or it's a different process, right? I think for referring or really helping young people get the supports that they need. So it feels to me like there's more opportunity and, I mean, at the elementary level, of course, there are, mental health crises that happen at any age. But a lot of it at the elementary level is just about, how we're really engaging in social emotional learning competencies, right? And really infusing that type of stuff and creating safe people and protective factors, layering students with protective factors at elementary school. So I guess those are the types of things that I'm curious about how we're really implementing supports there. Because there's already automatically more that we can do at the secondary level to support students on how we're really engaging.
So sorry, thanks because of your.
Please.
So I got a text message from the
only for verbiage here.
Hmm.
The social worker basically introducing herself to me and had a nice little picture and a basic welcome saying, hey, if you need help in these 10 categories, I'm here to help you. So that was great to receive that as a parent. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
That
Yeah.
Where that is being dispersed and shared with our parents.
Do we know if that might be a consistent practice at all 3 schools or just at Cascade View?
I'm not
Yeah,
sure,
we
but I
can
got
follow
it.
up.
Yeah, that'd be great. You know, again, kind of like comes to how are we ensuring that there's
Yeah.
consistency and support, right? Because another thing, if we think, you know, we want to see continuity, not just across the district, but like having, particularly because we have 5 schools, having continuity is actually going to ensure that not just the students, but the families know from elementary all the way to high school, there's some sense of just understanding about how processes work, how systems works, how things, you know, operate, who they should contact when, like, if we're having that consistency across schools, it's just gonna make it easier for families moving and students moving through the system, all of our grades.
Can I tell another anecdote from my kids? So I have a 4th grade kid who speaks no English, went to school. Of course, the teacher is talking and he doesn't understand the thing the teacher is saying, so he's singing and walking around the classroom, which is disrupting everything and no one's happy. Well, he's kind of happy, but so the liaison stepped in, which is I'm totally grateful for. The kid was singing because he just in the last 5 months crossed the desert in Mexico on foot without food. And what he kept having were flashbacks about being hungry. And so he told the liaison that all I could do was sing and it made me feel better. Now, what are the services for this kid? Because if the liaison hadn't stepped in, they would have had no idea what was going on in this kid's head. But we don't have enough language supports to be able to, huh? I know, but you know, for all of our kids and languages, I just think of the trauma that these kids are actually experiencing at school. And we don't want that. We want to do everything we can to figure out how to help them. But we don't have enough. And it's not a criticism of anybody here. It's just a criticism of what society is like right now, especially in Tukwila, which I love.
Well, you're welcome to come down to the legislature and tell the stories.
I
to
should
the
tell those
legislature.
stories, huh?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
tuck you into some of my legislature meetings.
Yeah.
Director Morris, did you have your hand up from before or again?
My hand is not up.
It's up on the screen.
It is.
Sure. Okay, any other questions, comments, thoughts around this? Just want to say thank you for continuing to hear me like a broken record. Say the same thing over and over again. Okay, moving on to D, instructional minutes.
I think this is the average question, but I just, on the spreadsheet they were given, you know, it's showing 1052 for all the high school. What you're showing up above is 1065 plus 56. Is that just a not correct number? I mean, 1052, 1052, I think it should really be higher than that. Because you're adding the just annual instructional hours for full plus early.
But it's that averaging 996 and 1065.
If this doesn't happen, I can get back to you on that, but,
Okay,
I want to say that there was also an ask to check in with other districts. And, we are higher,
okay,
we have more lunchtime,
okay.
And we have no recess time in other districts.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I just agree with this till now, just doing that, but I assume we're meeting the state requirements and everything. Yeah.
My question, I do have an additional question. It says 20 minutes for lunch of seat time. By the time the students go through the lunch line, are they getting 20 minutes of seat time in order to eat? Because sometimes that line is very long and they maybe have 5 minutes of seat time. And that's a concern. And I'm not sure how to alleviate that problem, but if it's 20 minutes of seat time, and yeah, that's a concern. And then recess time counts as instructional time, yes?
Yes.
Okay, and how many minutes of recess are elementary students getting for the day? I'm just concerned because my concern is, would we ask adults to sit there that long before they have a break and focus? And yet we're asking young people to do that.
So those 25 minutes are broken up. According to the recommendations of OSDI, we should have recess before lunch to make sure that our students are eating their lunches. And so that first recess is happening before lunch and going into it, and then there's a PM recess. And so we want to make sure that we're following the guidelines of OSDI, unless there's a different recommendation.
Right, and all elementary students doing that?
Yes.
So they don't have a mid-morning recess anymore? They just have the one that's attached to lunch?
We have the one that's attached to lunch, and then we have a PM recess. And so if we continue to add on minutes, I guess the question will be, how do we balance that with the actual instruction?
I guess just asking a student to sit for 2.5 hours before they get an activity break seems like punishment.
So there are specials that happen, so they're not sitting in their seat, in their classroom all straight until the recess.
Yeah, right.
So there is PE, there is the different specials that happen before they even get to the recess.
If you have those things in the morning, yes, but if you don't have a specialist in the morning, then they are being asked to sit. I just am concerned about lack of recess and the lack of an adequate lunchtime. And I know that the community members are concerned. And I'm not sure how to address that issue, but.
Yeah, because if we do more than 30 minutes of lunch, then we're cutting into our instructional minutes.
Yeah, and I mean, most classrooms I've been in over the years, no teacher makes them sit for 2.5 hours. I mean, they design activities to get it to move around, and they, teaches the sense, if the class is ready to
Yeah, they give a brain.
move, so, yeah,
Get up and move.
yeah.
Not quite the same as being outside with their friends.
Well, I understand the lunch specifically probably can't be adjusted. I think it would be interesting to get some information on how that's actually impacting students' ability to eat, and what impact that does have. So because Director Morris was talking about, if lines really are genuinely super long and young people aren't getting their meal, except for 5 minutes to shove it down, like what other creative solutions could we come up with to help speed that through rather than extending lunchtime? So again, we're stuck with the 30 minutes, understand that. How is it impacting our students? How can we support and minimize the impact on students without adjusting that time?
I mean, other than eating a bag of toffees while you're standing in
Exactly.
line.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk to Mr. Watt to see what the wait times are, so we can talk that.
Is it 30 minutes or is it 20 minutes for lunch?
30.
30 minutes.
And I think if nothing else, then that would at least give us the data, right, and the story to then be able to have like more grounded conversations with community and with parents as we're talking about some of these things.
And it's gonna look very different for kindergarten than for 5th grade, than for
Absolutely.
8th grade
Yep.
or 11th grade. Yeah.
And little people, they talk most of the time during meals anyway and end up shoving their food no matter what. So like,
Yeah.
there's only so much we can do there to minimize that. Any other questions, comments, thoughts on this? Okay, so we'll move to the Title IX task force. Were you able by chance to pull up the updated version? Thank you so much. So there were just a few questions around this, and I wanted to just, I already actually made the updates, but then wanted to have just a tiny bit of conversation if there was anything additional we needed to update or change or add to this. So the few components that I did add, Director Larson wanted just kind of some more, guidelines around kind of operations, just to make it more clear, even though some of it is laid out in the procedure, just wanted to have it here for clarity's sake. So if you maybe just scroll down to the second page, looking for committee operations. Keep going, almost there. So there's page 3, that's longer than I thought. Okay, so this just kind of outlines a bit of what the committee will, kind of how the committee will do its work. Though I wanted to keep it open enough so that they have the flexibility and the freedom to kind of go kind of for their work to be executed and implemented in a way that felt good for them. So that was the biggest piece, and most of these are just references back to or copy and paste from the procedure itself, where all these things are already outlined. The additional thing, the other additional thing that I added in is, and this was just because an oversight, I forgot to add it in the original, is that students who are members of the task force will receive a small gift card. I was kind of partnering with some folks from UW to support this, just kind of the crafting of this. And she, one of the partners there, has staff gift cards that they are willing to help support this, and they're also looking into other funding opportunities so that we can provide other compensation or incentives to be a part of this task force. So we know for sure there will be gift cards for students, and we're hoping that there may be some other incentives that we can offer folks. I didn't put the other incentives yet because I'm hoping that'll just be a cherry on top, but I at least added that in there for students to hopefully incentivize student participation, because we know how busy you all are, and also we know the critical role that you play in this particular task force. So those were the big changes. Kind of the other question that came up was around kind of process for committee selection. It is a tiny bit vague in here. So the board of directors is responsible for the selection of the committee. So how it'll work is there will be a Google form that folks will fill out to apply for committee membership. And then there we are going to create a small selection committee, which will consist of me and a few other folks. My hope is that it'll include you as well. I can let folks know who those people are. I haven't started identifying them yet, they'll be the ones that select the task force membership. So that's kind of how that process will go. Director Morris or Bowler Jack, were there any other clarifying things that y'all needed?
No, I think you got it. put
No.
together.
Okay.
I'm just asking for the board to receive the schedules from each elementary so we can look at recesses and lunches. And there are also some comments in the chat about the high school lunch also being a concern.
We'll definitely get some of the, get that from folks, yeah.
Thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to just touch on was the potential overlap between, in our collective bargaining agreement, we have this HOPE team, which is self-organized positive environment team, which reading about it, it sounds like it's primarily around discipline, which has some overlap with this, not necessarily a lot, but it might be worth just maybe at some point doing a check-in between the two teams, and not maybe somebody on this inclusion task force will have been on the HOPE team, I don't know, just because it sounds like there could be some possible
For sure.
connections there.
Do you think that's worth kind of like naming anywhere in here, or just kind of to have as, you know, as the committee kind of comes to bring its conclusions and such?
Yeah.
Okay. And just so kind of folks know, so the timeline of this is the task force will kind of bring back their final recommendation to the board the first week in April. We were hoping to that in March, but part of the reason why we did April because April is actually Sexual Violence Prevention and Awareness Month. So kind of lining it up with that. And wanted to really make sure that we give the task force a reasonable amount of time to do the work thoroughly, right? So it's always a balance between making sure that we're doing it with intention and thoughtfulness, and also having some actionable things behind it. So I didn't want to make this a year. I wanted to kind of make it with the intent and awareness that either this task force would be asked to continue, or we would likely then create additional task forces to kind of look more into whatever this task force and committee finds. Questions?
I was just wondering for the committee selection process of the selection board. I was wondering if you were thinking of including any other student representatives as well, aside from me.
Absolutely. So maybe that's actually something that we can partner on in figuring out who that selection committee would be. My hope is to have one person, at least from the administrative team, myself, at least a student rep or two, and then a staff member that so, and again, this will just be for the selection. My hope is that we'll have so many people volunteering to serve on this task force, and also want to be realistic that we may not. So the selection process may be extensive. It also may just be, no, that's okay. But there is a minimum task force membership, because it's really important that, at least to me, that we are really intentional about getting the voices that need to be present and not going forward with something if we don't have those stakeholders there. So it is possible that we have to extend just a little bit the recruitment time if we need to continue to do some more pushing and advertising. Thanks for the question. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns on this?
So do we have to vote on this or anything? We don't. do
We do, it's on our action items.
Oh, it is
yeah.
under. Oh,
Mhm.
there it is. Thank you.
Yep, and then, yeah, and then voting on it will be kind of the initial. Yep. And I will get the form, ready to go for the applications to start coming in by Monday of next week.
Cool.
Okay. Now to the assessment calendar. To continue a little bit of our conversation from our work session.
I guess my other comment is to continue to try and see if there's places where we can, cut down the number of times of assessments, whether it's by using iReady for some of these other assessments, just to hopefully get some more instructional time back. That's an ongoing.
Makes sense.
I'm really interested, probably walk away, but I'm curious if either of our student representatives specifically have any thoughts around this assessment calendar. I know, Dennis, last time you shared some really great insight around just kind of assessment preparation and how we're really getting students ready to take those, even talking about them, like what are these assessments even measuring? And I know you spoke a little bit to that earlier, like really trying to just be more clear about that and follow up after the assessment. So I'll say, I'm so curious about those thoughts. Thank you. Is this getting voted on? Okay. So I guess as we kind of continue the conversation around assessments and, get some of this information that Director Larson was asking about, would there be opportunity to perhaps modify or adjust if, in a few months from now, we get some of that data back, we get some more information, we decide that, assessments, there might be some assessments that we don't need to, I don't know, is there room to adjust this?
The adjustments, so there's basically two, there's the kind that come to us from the state, and they provide us the windows, and then the buildings decide when they're gonna do those assessments. Each individual building does, and the leadership team does, so whatever works for them. The other one are the vendor assessments, which is basically iReady. They suggest a period of time between the three assessments, and there was an adjustment made this year to do the third iReady before the SBA. So that was an adjustment this year so that we have better information headed to the SBA for any last minute interventions or anything that might need to be covered prior to the SBA.
Does every school have an assessment coordinator?
They do, they're called building assessment coordinators, and they're normally certificated staff in the elementary. It's a stipend position. At Foster High School, because they have so many more students, we have a classified staff member that does a half-time para and half-time assistant.
And so the certs in the elementaries are full-time teachers doing this on top?
Or interventionists, or
Okay.
the interventionists are predominantly in two are interventionists.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I actually have a question about what kind of implementations are being put in place to prepare students for these upcoming tests.
It's more of a question.
Okay. In terms of the initial assessment for, let's say, IRB. When you come to take the IRB assessment, it is at this point, you do your absolute best for the initial. And then the instruction that you are receiving along the way should be what is preparing you for the interim assessment. And then prior to you taking that interim assessment, you should have had a conversation about what that initial score, what that initial number means. And you set some goals in terms of what you need to do to move forward. So then you begin to own and understand, okay, this is my number, already. Here's what I need to do in this particular class in order for me to move my number. So then at the interim, when you take that next assessment, based on the conversation, and the goals that you set the first time, there should be some check-in points along the way, so that when you get the interim, you know exactly what you're aiming for. And then after you take that, you compare those two numbers to see, okay, here are the things that I did differently, and my numbers improved. So I need to just continue on with those strategies so that my numbers will improve the final time. And so when you say is there something that needs to happen, the IRB is standards based. And so the instruction that you are receiving will be standards based. And if it's not, that's where the misalignment comes in. And I gave an example when I was meeting with a group in that sometimes you can be, as a teacher, you can be teaching, and I've done this. I'll say me, I taught the best lesson, but it wasn't a standards-based lesson. So my students got an 8 on that assessment, on what I gave them, the classroom-based assessment. And then when they took an objective assessment, they didn't do so well because what I was teaching them was not aligned to what they were supposed to learn in terms of the state assessment. Okay, and so we have to just make sure that the lessons are based on the state standards, because the assessments that you're getting are all state standards based. Would that help?
Yes. So is that being implemented this year or has it been done before? Or like,
So so that is how, that's the way it's supposed to happen. So it's, okay, I'll say it's implemented this year.
So it sounds to me like there's two things, right, that needs to happen. Like one is really ensuring that our teachers are teaching to the standards, right, to actually prepare from a content perspective for those tests. I think something that came up last time, and I'm curious if it's kind of where your question is centered around. You said, I think you used the word last time that testing is a strength, or test taking is a strength. And not everybody has the skills to take tests. Test anxiety, I have it like nobody's business. And so I could be as prepared with the competencies as possible in the content for the test, but not the test taking process itself. And so I think actually you had mentioned, and these might not be the right ones at all, but I think you mentioned like an ICA or IBA and how those mirror the SBA. And is there a way to like utilize other things to actually prepare people for the test taking process and less the competency process, which I also recognize is a piece that we need to get to as well. So that I think it's twofold. Is that?
yeah. And I also want to point out a comment in the chat as well about preparing the skill of test taking.
Yeah.
And there's also, because that some students have been asking for like SAT prep course and how to test take and all of that, and you know.
And to your point, yes, test taking, and then Director Larson, you mentioned added strategies. Added strategies will also help prepare for test taking strategies as well. So a program that we already have in the district. A program that we already have in the district, it's just a matter of making sure that there is being used everywhere and not just in pockets.
And part of that assessment coordinator or whatever, sorry, forgot what you named it, but the elementary, yeah, they're the ones that help get the kids ready or help the teachers get the kids
Yeah,
ready.
they organize the event, the testing event.
Okay,
The teachers are really responsible
Okay.
for preparing the students.
okay, all right.
Does that take away from their interventionalist duties? Their ability to provide those services?
Occasionally, yes.
You know, I wonder if there could be an opportunity, kind of what you were talking about earlier about, kind of seeing a pattern of assessment data, maybe one assessment and a little bit of a lower score going on. The second assessment they do, there's some improvements and maybe. I wonder if we could use that first assessment as an opportunity to say, particularly for those that may have a lower score, maybe we use that as a place to say, to check in with those students and even ask about, not about even content or scores, but how was that test taking experience for you? And are there ways that you really struggled with the test process? And how can we then support you in that? So then that could be kind of the support that we implement between test 1 and test 2. And then after test 2, then we're really thinking about, okay, what interventions have we, because we helped you with this testing, or we put some things in place to support you with the testing.
And that's some of the conversations that students will say, you know what,
Yeah.
I knew it, I just panicked, I got nervous. And so let's set a goal in terms of when you get nervous, what do you do?
Yeah.
Do you eliminate two, or what do? You take deeper, so what are you going to do? So that's part of that conversation.
That's great.
Yeah. what we have with students.
Awesome. Any other thoughts, questions, Director Morris?
No.
Okay, and then that moves us to the last questions only presentation and public records requests. Any additional questions, comments on this one? Okay. Great, we will move on then. Okay, so that brings us to a live presentation. It's exciting, I haven't had a live presentation since I've been on the board, of the strategic plan. So I believe, I assume that's you, or is that Dr. Bush?
Myself and Dr.
Both.
Borges, yeah.
Great,
So we have submitted the draft strategic plan. Again, this is reflecting some of the work that myself, Dr. Borges, meeting with Dr. Steach, about taking the feedback that we've had previously, putting these into some SMART goals. So that's what you're seeing on the first several pages, really outlining 4 of those areas. And then you can see on the additional pages, there are some things beyond the SMART goals. So things that we're either developing, there's kind of a chart down at the bottom, developing, communicating, implementing, or monitoring. So these are some of the other areas that aren't necessarily SMART goals, but they could be strategies or something that we're working with. Just to give an idea about the additional work that's happening around the particular SMART goals. So the plan is this week, we are in, there are 4 open houses that are happening. We'll have Dr. Steach there.
this week,
Yes, this week. We have open houses this week
okay,
in our schools. Yeah.
okay,
And so our plan is to have, to be available at the open houses to get feedback from parents. And then we'll be going into classrooms as well and getting feedback from students at the elementary and middle school.
that must have been communicated in the weekly staff bulletin?
Yes,
Okay, how did it get communicated out to families?
that we communicate that out in each building, that we have a table available with our strategic plan there. Because they're each at, they're different nights. So,
Yeah.
Oh, so individual principals have communicated out to their families that there will be a table, is that set up? John will be there, you two will be there.
Yeah.
And it will just be kind of an informal, what will that, can you do like what that process will look like?
sure, so we have these as the start for our SMART goals. So this is getting feedback on what we have identified as SMART goals, but also leaving open the possibility of any additional feedback or SMART goals. So if somebody says, you know, I really think this should be a SMART goal under this particular category, we'd be open to that, to the feedback to see if it's reflected. Either they're using different words of what we're saying, or we have it reflected in a different area of the plan. And that'll be true for students and staff as well. So this will be going out to staff to get feedback.
This is a pretty big document to read on the spot.
Yes.
And so Dr. Steach and I are planning to visit buildings tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday. To share with them, this is the information that they have provided us, and now it has been codified into a strategic plan. And then get some feedback from each of the buildings on Wednesday and Thursday. And then our family liaisons and our district engagement specialists are going to help us during our open houses to get information from parents in terms of them understanding. They may have feedback, they may look at it and say, you know what, we trust what you're doing. Or they may ask for some additional information, whatever the case is, just want to make sure that they know that this document is here. If they have any feedback that they want to provide, they have an opportunity to do that.
So we're gonna have copies for them to take home?
Not necessarily take home, we want to do a presentation so that people have the same understanding of this document.
So how do you do a presentation in an open house?
So they are going to go, so the principals have outlined what they're going to be doing. And then when parents are finished with the teachers, they want to come at the end to the presentation at the tables. And then we will share with them what the student has.
Okay. How are you gonna be at 2 schools at once? It's
So,
pretty tight.
yeah, so we plan to go to Thorndike and then head on over to Muskie. And the complication with that is, well, the complication meaning that the information went out prior to the new principal being hired, so that date was set inadvertently on the same night.
Sure. I mean, one starts at 5 and the other starts at 5:30. And one ends at 6 and the other ends at 6:30.
We'll make it happen.
Okay, all right.
We'll make it happen. There's more. You can do it.
Director Morris?
I just have a question about the comment section in the chat. Are these comments addressed at some point?
So, I'm not actually super sure that we have a process in place for addressing things in the comments, particularly because we have a process for submitting public comment, which is not via the chat. And so technically, no. And at the same time, I mean, I think what comes up in the chat is often great insight that we can utilize. And in addition to that, I think that we need to do a more effective job about ensuring that there are responses to comments that are coming from community in our board meetings. And I know we talked a little bit about what the response should look like, but we have not implemented that well. So I think we've got some opportunity to, as we are probably going to continue with the hybrid meetings forever, because they're great. We should probably get something in place around what following up and following that chat looks like. So
Thank
we
you.
can add that.
There are some great comments in there tonight, especially.
For sure. And I also want to be mindful too about, we're not technically supposed to address public comment in the meeting. So we probably should not address comments as they're coming through the chat in the moment. Just to
Right,
make sure
but
that
just
we're
so that
equitable around our processes.
Just so that they could be addressed at some point. Thank you.
They could make public comment at the end if they wanted to bring those comments back up, right?
Absolutely. Those comments that you are putting in the chat, compile them into a document. I don't care if it's 5 different topics in one public comment. There's a public comment section at the end. Please add those in. Speak up at that time. That would be great. That way they can end up on our official record. And then we have to address them. Yes.
So I've got a few comments. First of all, I think if you're gonna give this to parents, there's way too many acronyms in here. This thing is full of acronyms that parents aren't gonna know what they mean, MTSS, BSSC, ESS, all these things. And I think there's, at a high level, I think there's too many of them. Particularly, I think it seems to me we need to focus down more. Otherwise, what happens is, they get lost in the shuffle. I also, on the on the first set of goals, it's not up there anymore, under student growth. First of all, any of these goals, like 2 through 5, that say 100%. 100% goals almost never happen. I mean, I can kind of see it in that first 100% of students will set student growth goals. I mean, maybe you could get that to happen, but certainly, growth goals, 100%, that's just not gonna happen. I mean, that was one of the defaults of where the problems with No Child Left Behind, as they said, 100% of the students after 10 years, and it's not gonna happen. 100% goals then just get dismissed as unrealistic. I think the process of setting good SMART goals is to first of all establish a baseline, where are we today? And then say, okay, what are we going to implement that we think is going to move them? These are, 2 or 3 things, whatever we're going to do to implement them. And based on what we know about what we're trying to implement, here's what we think a reasonable goal for the first year and the second year and the third year. And these 10 and 15, I mean, they look, unfortunately, we've done that a lot around here. They look like just arbitrary numbers that somebody's, okay, 10, 15, okay, that sounds nice. As opposed to, here's what we're planning to do, and here's what we think, we can move this much in each year. The other thing about these first goals that are from is the points thing. So parents are gonna have no idea what do points mean? Points doesn't, I asked questions, so scale score points. Nobody, no parent knows what that means. So what's meaningful is, and what the numbers I like to look are this, grade levels. Parents can understand, you're moving one grade level, moving more than one grade level. And so, iReady has built into it what they call typical growth and stretch growth, typical growth being 1, stretch growth being more. And, the other thing about these goals is it's like for all students, well, first of all, we need, again, going back to applying the race equity toolkit, we need to be breaking it down. We need to be disaggregating it by race, and we need to be disaggregating it by, 2 grade levels behind, 3 grade levels behind, where students are, because we know that students that are like 3 grade levels behind or 2 grade levels behind are they need to be stretch growth for several years, because that's the definition in iReady of, to get them up to grade level within a reasonable amount of time, 2 or 3 years. So I think, the way these ones are set, are problematic to me for a number of reasons. And I think we should be, do some disaggregation work by race and by, ability or academic position, if you will, and then setting goals based on that. I think those are the other, there were a few places where they're referring to student survey topics that I think don't exist in our current set. So I think in one place you said assessment is a custom subset of EES student survey data. So obviously, I think there's a couple of other places where, so in other words, we would need to work with CE to establish these new bases. I think that's also true in the instructional technology, although it doesn't mention it there, that we'd have to invent some new categories, which is fine, and that's good. But I think there's a couple of other places we need to do that. So let's see, the one other comment I was going to make was, on 3D4, which is the HOPE teams. The other, I guess, overall concept here is, so these are some goals. The question is kind of, how are we going to get to these goals? What are we going to do? What are the tactics we're going to put in place to get to these goals? And that seems to me a column that's kind of missing here. We're going to do this and this and this. Implement a new curriculum. We're going to change the way we do instruction or whatever. Because that, and like I say, that to me then drives, in the first year of an implementation of the curriculum, we're going to get hopefully a little bump up, but not as much, I think more after grades 2 and 3 or years 2 and 3. So anyway, I think, yeah, I think it's gonna be, it's gonna be really tough for parents to digest this thing, because I don't think it's too complicated, it's too much full of acronyms, and I think it needs to be simplified quite a bit.
Thank you for all those thoughts. Second all of that. One question I have too is like, is this gonna be translated? So that our non-English speaking families can read this document?
So I'm not sure that I was clear that this document will be with us and we will be speaking to parents about this. And our family liaisons will be there to support that communication. But it's not intended for them to leave because it's a draft. So it's not intended to to go anywhere.
Okay.
Unless there's a recommendation that we cannot draft.
So it sounds like maybe there's kind of a layer, in terms of your presentation, there's kind of a layer of talking points
Yes.
that you're gonna put on top of this, which will eliminate all the
Yes.
the acronyms and so forth, because, yeah, okay. It would be interesting, just, like I say, I still think, I mean, that's great for doing parents, but I would also like, yeah, it would be interesting to see what those talking points are, because that may, hopefully, that can focus this too, because I think even the staff would have trouble kind of digesting all of this. I mean, I think they could understand the acronyms, but, it's when you're trying to establish a focus for an organization, if there's too much stuff, then I think people get lost. So there's probably another, like I say, the whole thing around academics, I think those goals just don't look right to me at this level. I mean, you can talk about it when you're talking about parents, we're gonna have goals around student growth, in terms of,
Yes.
how are they going at one grade level and so forth. And so, for that purpose, you can do that, but I still think when you get down to this level, we need better goals.
I think, oh, sorry, Director Morris, if you're your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, since this is the first open house they've had in years, if it would be better to leave that presentation for another time and just let them absorb school and the classrooms.
Yeah, Director Morris, that's actually kind of a thought that I had as well. It feels like we are trying to squeeze this in a way that may not, I just wondered that it might not be the time and the place. I think I'm also curious, like, what is the next step? So after this, let's move forward with these, you have kind of a verbal presentation, though I'm a firm believer that nothing should ever be just verbal, because learning styles, right? I would not be able to listen to you talk about these things and absorb it. I would need to see something.
Yep.
So yes, I would encourage you not just to do a verbal presentation. But additionally, okay, so you do that, then what? What's the next step that really gives folks access to the goals?
So after this, then we were gonna come back together and formalize, it will no longer be a draft, because now we would have heard from parents, students, staff, and then take that information and then begin to formalize this, and it's no longer a draft.
So how are you gonna do that? You're gonna have 10 minutes in each school. I don't understand how you're gonna get feedback from parents.
So at the end of their presentation with the schools, then we were going to have the parents come to our table, do our presentation, and then ask parents for input on high expectations. And then have another group talk about engaged learners, and then have another group talk about relationships, and have another group talk about equity and empathy. And then we would then be able to share back out what we've heard before we come back to you all and say, this is the final We would be able to say, we've heard from our parents, and we would be able to say, we've heard from our students. And this is, from what I'm understanding, this is a follow-up of information that they've already given us. in
No,
conversation.
not exactly. So, and actually, honestly, this is why, the process for gathering feedback was less than ideal, previously. Additionally, there were many voices that were not included in that process, until the very last minute. And so, you know, one of the reasons I think that I've been talking to you about really wanting, what is the plan for this phase? Is so that we can ensure that it's getting the right type of input, right? And enough of the right type of input. Because what we know, and this is not just from my own thinking about it, we actually heard this come out of the mouth. I put my own bias into this strategic plan coming from our consultant. So to me, that is really problematic. And that's why I've been so intentional about saying, what is the plan to ensure that we're not just going to infuse our own stuff and really get the input of families and community. So I understand that, you know, the process of formulating the goals, I actually thought that was going to be a collaborative process with community. So when I got this, I was a little bit surprised. So yes, and it was really faulty, and didn't really, it wasn't good enough. And we made that really clear as a board about that. And so, yeah, and I think another thing too, is I appreciate the, you know, the quantifiable, you know, amount of folks that y'all are hoping to get input from, but, you know, it becomes superficial if it's just, okay, great, we got 50 parents stop by our table. Well, but what's the quality of the input that you're getting, right? And I think, you know, to Director Boladrek's point, you know, one opportunity for 20 minutes perhaps of input was really minimal for all of this.
And especially when you have translations.
Yes.
Also going on.
Yes.
So I think there are a couple of things that in thinking about this again was to give an opportunity to get feedback on kind of what we've surmised, not to say these are the only pieces. So in getting these talking points, then it would be reflecting that back out. And so I think that those are the areas, obviously, that we want to make sure there's enough translation out there so that people can read that information. So yes, to your point, like just listening to it is going to be hard to input, reflect on, give that back. So, you know, as I'm seeing this, it will be getting some of that feedback through that. And I think we can still make people aware of the strategic planning. Even if they are not able to give us the information and say, look, we're still in this process. These are the areas that we're talking about. We have our talking points. We can get some feedback from them then, but also given some of the other feedback, make this more digestible for families in a way that is a little more reflective, and to tell them we are trying to prioritize, you know, 2 or 3 in these areas. We have 5 of these because in many of these areas, because based on the feedback we had before, that's how we kind of got to this number of SMART goals, knowing we weren't going to have 5 for each area. We need to figure out how to prioritize. So that's that process as well. So I think, you know, we'll adjust, we'll still go through, do the presentations with the talking points, but we're going to add some of it. We'll need to add additional steps to make sure that we're getting good feedback. And I agree with the quantitative number of input wasn't just to have it be a checkbox. It was to make sure that we were able to reach out to enough of the stakeholders in those categories to say, great, you know, we have some in-depth stuff like going into the classrooms. That's an opportunity for us to be in a classroom with 25 students so that we can talk about that particular piece and not just have a listening session available for students and only have 3 or 4 students come by.
And as much as I appreciate that endeavor, I just, as a parent, reflecting back as a parent, I could care less about that. I want to meet my child's teacher. and I want to get a feel for the school, and the district agenda is not a priority. It's been years since they've been able to do this, and it just seems like we're trying to throw something at them that it isn't the opportune time to do.
Well, and I think, again, if it's at the end, after they've already done all those pieces, if they have an interest, great. And if we find out we've only had a few parents come by, then that's telling us they're kind of burnt out for the night. That's okay. We need to find another opportunity to reach out and connect with them.
Do the kids come to open houses?
I think some do.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the
Yeah,
most part, they
that's
do,
what I thought.
especially
Okay.
obviously at the elementary level.
Okay, so we got kids running around too.
Mhm.
It's gonna be hard to do a presentation.
I think you may have already alluded to this, but are parents aware that there's the strategic planning component happening? You said that.
Yes, that was,
principals
that was
communicated
communicated
that.
out. Yeah. So again, I think making them aware of, we're in this process. And that this isn't the only time for them to get feedback. So being a little more clear.
So I would appreciate a timeline and an outline of what is the complete plan for gathering the input that we need. I think that would be really great, so that we're not caught off guard. I guess it's very possible that I missed something, an email or it being in a weekly memo, but I don't recall hearing anything about these community listening sessions happening this week.
At the open houses.
Correct.
Okay, I thought we put that out, but
Well, but I guess like, where did you put it? That's what I said, like, I could have totally missed an email somewhere, and I will totally own it if I did, but if I didn't see it, it's probably pretty likely that there are a lot of other people that didn't see it, because I'm probably on my district team, I mean, yeah, so if we as a board don't know, how can we be an advocate for the district within our community and say, hey, guess what? There's a listening session coming up at this community open house. It's really important that you're there because we're talking about the strategic plan. We can't be advocates for the district. We don't know about what's happening. Right? So a timeline would be really great. I also think it would be really valuable if we sent out a communication specifically about the strategic plan that even said, maybe there's a flyer that says, here are all the opportunities to give feedback on the strategic plan over the next 3 months. I don't know, that was just that was a really arbitrary number I just threw out there that could not be it at all. 3 months is good. But yeah, so some communication plan, I think would be really useful for folks. And so we have like a strategic plan flyer, right? So that if someone's asking me about that, I can be like, great, look, here are all these opportunities to come and give input. I think that'd be valuable too for folks that aren't parents, but are still invested in the work of the district, right? Who may have an incoming student soon, or who, just is still deeply involved in the district. So how are we reaching those folks as well? I know for a fact we have community members that join our board meetings to listen in, that are invested in the work of the district, that aren't getting these types of communications. So how are we really reaching beyond?
Seems to me that so this, if I'm understanding the process, this is the result of going out and having some community meetings and collecting
from the spring.
Yeah, and the CEU collecting this data. So this is kind of their synthesis of it and their translation into measures. And so one group that, I'd be really interested in is kind of closing the loop with those folks that gave us all the input. Go back to those folks and have that, okay, here's what we heard, here's where we're going, did we get it, kind of right. So, yeah, I'm kind of with Director Morris on, the parents that are coming to the open house are, probably more interested in meeting the teacher. Then you may get, a few parents that want to engage in this, but probably that's not gonna be a great source of this. But, trying to reach back out to the folks that, and then, of course, inviting anybody else who wanted to be involved in that would be, I think, an important kind of feedback mechanism in this might work out better.
As I look at the calendars of the activities that the schools have put out, including, while I was looking at Thorndike's, they have every minute of that hour filled with, ending with pizza. Now, maybe while they're eating pizza, you can slip in some information.
So it's not built into their
It's not,
schedule.
no.
look forward to the next update.
Yes,
Timeline hopefully coming before the next board meeting though?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, any other thoughts, questions? Yeah, thank you. Okay, moving on to action items. So we'll start with action item A, approval of human resources staffing reports. Dimension,
Second.
any discussion or questions? I see you unmuted yourself. That's to say aye. Okay, all in favor of approving the human resources staffing report, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Right, it is approved. So action item B, approval of assessment calendar 2022 to 2023.
So moved.
Any discussion or questions? Guys, you're really reading all the things we've already discussed. All in favor of approving this assessment calendar?
I,
Aye.
Item C, approval of the iReady assessment suite for 2022-2023.
So moved.
second,
Any discussion or questions?
Is that I really do want to have, before we come back, I really do want to have the, the deeper discussion about assessments and where we're going with all that and all that. So
Would it be useful to put that on a specific, like, put that down as an actionable? I just want to make sure
Well,
that
I
gets.
think it's hopefully it'll go on
Okay.
the work session.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor of approving iReady assessment suite?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, approval of donation, Dave Larson.
I will move that.
Any
This is great,
Okay.
Dave.
Second.
Second.
questions?
can you ask, I'm curious, what's the scholarship for?
What's it for?
Yeah.
It's for students at Foster High School, to, whatever they're doing in their post-secondary work. And it's a little different from the other scholarships. Most scholarships the students apply for. This particular scholarship, students are nominated by staff people, primarily teachers and other people at Foster High School who, it's targeted at students who aren't necessarily, have the highest GPAs and, all that kind of stuff. They're more of the students more farther down a little bit in the academic ladder to make sure that they have some money to help them.
So is it for mostly like graduating seniors?
Oh, yeah, it's all graduating seniors, yes. And so it's to be used for their, where the post-secondary endeavors are.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor of approving this donation, say aye.
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 All right, action item E, approval of the Title IX task force, which is actually called it that. What is it called?
Safety.
Safety and belonging, safety and inclusion task force. Thank you.
Second.
Or any questions, comments, something else you want to talk about it? All in favor? Say aye.
I,
Aye.
Do I have to abstain because it's my phone? Okay.
Dave didn't understand.
Oh, that's true. That's point. Okay, action item F, approval of the board policy number 2140 and 3112, the ones we reviewed last
So moved.
meeting.
Second.
Any questions, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 And then lastly, we have action item G, approval out of state travel for the AASA early learning cohort.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, it stands approved. So that moves us to, as a reminder, we removed H from this in our amended agenda. So we'll move now to our second opportunity for public comments. And I know we have at least one public comment virtually. So that is going to be. We start with V. Okay, V, if you wouldn't mind, you should be able to unmute yourself and share your public comment. Oh, give it just a second. We're getting there. Sorry, Bea, hold on. Okay, you should be, there we go.
There we go. Thank you. All right, my name is Nick Slay. I'm chemistry teacher at Foster High School. I would like to first thank the board for forming the Safety and Inclusion Advisory Board and consider students' perspective. Second, the highly capable program is highly problematic, as Dennis, student representative, has presented to you the evidence in concrete numbers. I would encourage our district to rise above using the highly capable program to meet the state requirements. Oh, can you hear me well? I forgot that I have this thing.
Yeah, we can.
Is that better? Very cool.
Yeah, thanks.
I would like to encourage our district to rise above using the highly capable program to meet the state requirement and collectively improve all teaching and serve all students. Labels often does not serve students well, but rather separate students, even if the cluster model does not put the highly capable students exclusively in their own class. And we already know that separate does not mean equal, let alone equitable. Lastly, when it comes to tests, students are constantly bombarded with a battery of assessments every year. Most students don't understand the point of the test or the difference between low stake and high stake testing. I think that we worry about, and I mean we as in like admin and teachers, we worry too much about stressing students out, that we tell them that it doesn't matter, so just do your best. But then that puts students on the idea that the tests really don't matter, so why do you try? So there needs to be a middle ground in our communication about the assessments to students and parents, where students are accommodated and prepared for the test so they feel less stressed, but also understand the purpose and importance of the test so they try their best. It might just mean that we need to be this transparent with them as I am with you right now. So when you look at the test, there's the Washington State Smarter Balanced Assessment, so the SBA, and the Washington Access to Instruction and Measurement, which is the WAAIM, an alternative version of the SBA for students with significant cognitive disabilities. And the Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science, the WACAS, which is all required by state law. They are all high stake tests which determine graduation, hiring of staff, school status, and accreditation. So we should prepare students for these tests if so much is riding on the results of those tests. And I personally would be very interested in forming some system or program to help students get prepared for those tests, specifically the WACAS, because I teach science, chemistry. And then students are also coming back from the pandemic with a lot of schools requiring or suggesting strongly that they take the SAT. And so it would be more equitable to have an SAT test prep course and also provide the test at no cost for the students. So those are my concerns and comments. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Slay. Appreciate that. So we see an additional public comments. Dr. Fremstead.
Hello, good evening, Board of Directors and Dr. Herndon. So I have a quick comment for public comment. I was listening to you all talk about master schedule. And of course, I will definitely follow up with Dr. Herndon and Dr. Borshaid. But I do believe with my knowledge involving the RCW, CBA, OSHA, district expectations when it comes to instruction curriculum, as well as the contextual history, as well as future implications that will support our staff and our students, that I could also be a thought partner in regards to what goes into creating an elementary master schedule, some of the things that speak to some of the resources that are needed. And I think this comes from last year at CD. We went through 11 sessions to build our master schedule. And in those 11 sessions, we had listening sessions for staff to give feedback. We had Google Forms for them to give feedback. We had our building leadership team that helped build out the master schedule. And then from there, I took all of our bullet points and shared it with our district leadership team in an email. So as I was listening to some of the questions on how things come about and what they look about, I think that I could be one of the people that may help with that. And then like when I was listening to Director Morris talk about students, for example, at CV, when I look at our K1 schedule and the breakdown, students start at 8:50, but by the time they do the breakfast and attendance and all the things that we do, they're starting their learning around 9:15, 9:20. Their recess is at 10:45. With this, their lunch follows at 11. So that gives them about an hour, 25, 30 minutes while they're in the classroom. Then from there, they eventually go to rotation, which is another hour out. Then they have their PM recess, which is an hour and 20 minutes out. And then from there, they transition, they have intervention and things like that. So we don't really have students, when we look at our master schedule, that are sitting for a long period of time. And so what ends up happening as teachers help build their blocks, because we give them the blocks, our 4th and 5th grade teachers, they would move their rotations in the morning. And therefore, there's always these breakouts. So therefore, kids aren't sitting for long periods of time. And then, of course, we always got to make sure we support food service. So lunches start at 11 because we have to give them time, to prepare breakfast, to clean up, transition, and then make it happen. So I just wanted to share that in the comments, also with recesses, we have a total of 25 minutes. So if you all need me as a thought partner, and I'm totally available because I think I have, like I said, those areas, RCW, OSHA, CBA, district expectations, all those things in place to help hopefully support next steps and conversations to support our staff and our kids.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fremstad. Appreciate that comment. And I appreciate you being here. I think it's really valuable for us as a board to hear directly from folks in the schools about what is taking place. So it gives us more context to the discussions that we're having. So thanks so much.
For sure.
Okay, are there any additional public comments? Okay, this was a long meeting, you all. Thank you so much for hanging in. Really, really great discussion. So thanks for that. All right, so I'll accept a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we will officially adjourn at 9:11 p.m. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. I'm sure. Does that say that? I don't think, okay. But we just,
That's officially superintendent is the